We'll call a print to order. I'm sorry, the council meeting to order.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item are minutes of the council and committee meeting held Monday, January 28th. Recommendations that the committee approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmussen. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item is a report of the General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to the solid waste collection program. We have introductory comments by our General Manager, Engineering and Public Works, Mr. Bill Susak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a check-in point for staff to check in with committee regarding the work that we're doing to prepare for an RFP issuance for solid waste services in Coquitlam. Staff are hard at work, and we anticipate being ready to issue the RFP toward the end of the month. Before you is a pretty comprehensive report on the issues that we're addressing in this report, as well as our approach to those issues. And we just want to make sure that we're on track in terms of how we're proposing to approach this RFP. We're in a situation where we need to be flexible, given the current environment regionally. There's actually provincial decisions and provincial initiatives that are being undertaken that we need to think through very carefully to ensure that we don't expose or at least minimize the exposure of our residents to some potential downsides of those initiatives. Some of you have probably recently heard about the MMBC organization and where they're at. And some of those issues still need to be sorted out. It'll take some time. We need to approach this RFP in a way where we can be flexible. Before getting into the details, I just wanted to acknowledge Smith-Wright Contracting. Mr. Frank Manella is a VP of Smith-Wright Contracting. He's in the audience. And Smith-Wright has been our service provider for the past number of years. They wanted to be here and listen to the discussion. They're obviously very interested in continuing. And to give them credit, they have produced, at least according to the polls that we take, the Ipso-Reid surveys, they have produced good results for Coquitlam residents over the past number of years. And we wish them the best. We've had a good working relationship with them. With that, Your Worship, staff are here to engage and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, and I'll echo on behalf of Council the comment about the service provider that we currently have. Mind you, it was a large improvement, largely because we were coming from quite some distance from where we are now, but nonetheless, we've heard good things, so thank you very much. And I've got two speakers on the list so far. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. Our service has been very, very good. I normally used to get an awful lot of complaints. I haven't had any complaints about a service. There's been one or so in the last month or two that's cropped up, but nothing really seriously. So, and I think that you're giving them around 15 months for everybody to bid. So I think it's plenty enough time. And I hope that Smith-Wright, now that they've been doing our job for about the last 6 years or so, they've got the equipment and everything else, so the bid should come in about half price. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. He's sitting there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now that Councillor Sikora has set the bar, Councillor Hodge.
Yes, and thank you. And I was glad to hear Mr. Susak address the concerns about the change that's taking place, and my concerns surround partially around EPR, extended producer responsibility, and what that's going to change. I mean, this is going to be potentially the biggest game changer since it's going to be the biggest game changer in recycling probably since the invention of the curbside blue box. And we don't know where this is going to go. We don't know how recycles are going to be collected. We don't know by whom. We continually hear that producers of the material may in fact be responsible for some of their own collection. And if that happens, the potential to have 5 different trucks going through a neighborhood, each picking up their own responsibility, does exist. I hope that we're not going to see that. But, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. Is it going to be single stream recycling, or is it going to be sorted at the curb? Is it going to be one big box with paper and cardboard and everything going in it, or are we going to separate? And, before we make the investment into even our own equipment, which would be the garbage cans, we don't know how much is going to go in each one. And I'm concerned about making long-term decisions right now based on that. And I got a few questions, but maybe I'll stop now and just let you respond on that point.
Sure. Through the chair, there is reasonable certainty on the solid waste garbage stream and the organics stream. There is uncertainty in the recycling stream because the province is moving through a plan to have producers of printed paper and packaging take care of their recycling. And the devil is in the details, and the implementation of the plan has yet to take place. The plan is still in the planning stages. I can share with you some discussion at the Regional Engineers Advisory Committee of Friday, where that committee took a fairly strong position about the late news where MMBC has stated they do not want to have glass as a part of the Blue Box program. There was unanimous agreement at that committee that we viewed that at a staff level as a degradation in level of service. We've let our views certainly be known to MMBC. Those issues still need to be worked out. This is still at the talking and discussion stage. Our understanding, though, is that the province wants to have this program resolved, if you will, and in place by sometime in the spring or the early summer. That's about all I can report out for now. We do have concerns about certain aspects of the implementation of packaging and printed paper, but the province is driving the bus on that policy right now. Our job is to really protect ourselves from any potential downsides of that policy implementation.
And that was going to be one of my questions, because I am familiar with some communities that don't allow glass in the recycling, and that is really problematic. I think it's to do with cross-contamination, and also glass has very low recycle value. I mean, there's a great value in aluminum, so everybody wants to pick up aluminum, but glass is heavy. It's hard to recycle. There's no aftermarket value for glass, where there is, at least very little, where there is at least some potential for paper and aluminum. So to me, not being able to put glass becomes problematic. We have a number of products now that we can't get rid of. Styrofoam is one that comes to mind. We have no styrofoam. We don't even accept it in our own work yard, our own recycle centers, and styrofoam takes up a lot of capacity in the household garbage. I was just wondering, have we made any progress on styrofoam? I know I've asked about this a couple of times in the past. Are we any closer on having an answer on styrofoam?
Your Worship, I'll ask other staff to chime in as well. There is, to my understanding, one styrofoam recycling facility that's servicing Tri-Cities. I think it's called Happy Stands, if I've got that right. And I'll ask just staff to chime in, if they would, on styrofoam, on the details. Got anything on there?
Yes, we have a meeting with some local processors of styrofoam to see what options may exist for Coquitlam residents. So we are exploring it. There are some challenges for us. Certainly, we need the space. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, is where there is no option right now for curbside collection, so our next best would be to provide some sort of drop-off location. And of course, we have our 2 depots, but there's not a lot of space at those depots for the amount of space that may be required for that volume of styrofoam that we could anticipate. So we are currently looking into it and hoping that we can come back with some options, in the near future. Burnaby right now is offering a pilot program for their residents, so we're also keeping a close eye and in contact with our counterparts in Burnaby just to see how that's going and the types of volumes that they're collecting, so we can use that information to see what we might be able to come up with for Coquitlam.
Thank you. Now, I think, I think one of the keys in this, I mean, obviously we have a capacity problem at Metro, and as a society, we're throwing out way too much. And I think that people want to do the right thing, but we have to make it convenient for them. And I think this is the whole sort of key to it's recycling and waste disposal. It has to be convenient. It has to be easy. And I think that, we need to make meaningful behavior changes if we're going to meet this capacity challenge, and that means helping to make it easy. And to me, waste reduction starts in the kitchen and inside the home, not on the curb. And it also starts with the producers of the packaging material. And I think, packaging is a huge problem. We as a society, we overpackage, including styrofoam and plastics and in some cases, some of these plastics are made from 5 different compounds, so you can't even put all the plastics in the same spot. And so I think that's going to be the challenge, is if we go to single stream, is all of these different compounds are going to end up in one giant big blue container on the side of the road. And at this point, we don't even know how big that container needs to be, because we don't know what all we're going to be able to put in it yet until the province gets back to us. And I think that's one of the immediate challenges that I see. The other big area, of course, is deconstruction material and demolition material. And I'm just wondering, and this is sort of away from this, but I know that we do manage that as well. And I'm just sort of wondering, is there any sort of areas that we're looking at in some of the other areas of waste reduction besides the single-family home? And I'm thinking demolition material is one that I'm curious about. The other one is that as we move to organics, how we're going to deal with some of the big producers of organic waste, which would be restaurants and supermarkets. And I do know that in some cases, do we look after that, or is that something we just administer, or does that factor into this contract?
Sure. I'll take a stab at a number of those issues. Metro Vancouver has issued some guidance on DLC recycling for redevelopment sites. Our environmental services staff is working with Jim's permits and licenses staff on how to best implement that from a development perspective. So those measures are underway and are expected to be implemented during the year 2013. So that there is increased recycling with redevelopment. You were talking about organics and essentially the ICI sector, the industrial, commercial, whatnot sector. The municipalities generally do not collect from that sector. That's pretty much a private contract, private haul situation. However, where those organics go will ultimately have to be governed by material bans. Part of the region's solid waste plan is the implementation of organic bans from the solid waste stream. My recollection is that the timeline for action on that is around 2015, but that's really very much a Metro Vancouver initiative. But there's in fact also even another twist in that, and that's called flow management, where right now a lot of that ICI material is winding its way outside of the region to cheaper processors, and and even being railed or trucked or whatever, sometimes I think into the United States. And those are issues that Metro is also grappling with, because there is a need to implement a waste-to-energy facility, and these materials are probably going to be needed to make the business case there.
Okay, and just back to ours a little bit more. Then if we set up, and I guess we're looking at, if we go automated and we go with the 3 bins, because I think that's what we're really sort of looking at here, how will that work? The report mentions, I guess, green waste would be weekly, recycle and solid waste would possibly alternate. But would you have, like currently we have unlimited green waste, correct? You can put out, I'm just thinking, how does that work in the fall? Because now, if we go automated, it has to go in the bin. So the days of putting the brown compostable bags on the curb full of leaves, that's over. Everything is going to have to go into that one bin. How is that going to work in the fall when you've got, people are raking their leaves and they're used to putting out the 4 bags, which got picked up and it got composted, which was great, but it's not going to fit into that green bin on that one day. How is that going to work?
The idea is that, I guess, the stinky stuff, if you will, gets picked up every single week. There might be some weeks in the fall where there are peak issues. I haven't got that, totally thought out in my head, but the current trend regionally, where automated collections exist, is that organics gets picked up every single week, and that organic includes your kitchen waste as well as your yard waste. What might happen during November when there's a lot of leaves, et cetera, frankly, I'll have to ask, some people in the industry, and how is that peaking best managed? There might be an issue there. Okay. The other streams would be picked up every 2 weeks. That is solid waste, essentially, let's call it the non-stinky garbage. It would be picked up every 2 weeks, along with recycling. Those are currently the trends. We're not saying that it's a certainty that we will do that, but we're certainly pointing out that those are the collection trends that are emerging across the region. Those trends tend to match up fairly well with the goals of the Regional Solid Waste Plan in terms of diversion. But we are going to be open to any technology and any methodology. Fundamentally, we want to be comfortable with what we're calling the value proposition in the next round.
And will the stinky stuff that goes in the green can, will those be bear-proof or a way of bear-proofing them?
What I would say is that for certain areas of the city, for example, Partington Creek, we'd be working with the contractor to absolutely roll out bear-proof cans. Whether we need to do that throughout the city, we haven't had that chat yet with internal staff, but there are certain precincts in the city where we would unequivocally want to have bear-proof, clipped, whatever garbage cans provided by the cart manufacturer.
Good, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had similar concerns, particularly on the recycle side of things. Coquitlam residents want to recycle. They want to be part of the solution, but they want it to be convenient and they want it to be somewhat understandable and clean. So I think we need to embrace recycling as much as many of our residents do. Now, not all of them do, but we need to work on those ones as well. My big challenges are, for example, on the goods that aren't picked up right now in the blue box. How do we make it easier for those goods to be recycled? Councillor Hodge mentioned some of them, styrofoam, for example, but there's batteries and compact fluorescent lamps and such, ballasts, and I see Bill's putting up his hand. He knows where we're going. Okay.
No, I mean, top of mind, Your Worship, really, I believe what you're referring to is a desire for a higher level of service for that particular stream. Now, we're going to be going out to the market, and we're going to be asking service providers to tell us, what can you do for us? One of the items that we can address in the RFP is to ask the collection service providers, what can you do for a higher level of service for recycling in Coquitlam? Currently, our level of service is, let's call it, limited. We have 2 relatively smaller places where residents can bring recyclables, and at that, not all of them. And we do have to sort out probably, locations. We have to sort out frequencies, et cetera. But we will be open to the processor and hauling companies to come to us, give us their ideas in this service offering, and let's see where we get to. Hopefully, we could report back with some ideas that come back from the private sector that provide that higher level of service. Now, that level of service may come at a higher cost, but that's something for us to, frankly, have a chat about when the respondents come forward.
Okay. And Councillor Hodge also mentioned the glass. That became an issue on Friday. It certainly, obviously, we need to find a solution there. Now, there are communities that have the glass deposit areas throughout their community instead of the blue box, because single stream, it does create some contamination, whereas on the curbside, it doesn't have that effect in the same way. Have we examined kind of best practices along those lines? I really think our residents would be upset, and I would be, quite frankly, if we made it more difficult to recycle glass, and as a result, more glass ended up in the garbage.
I'm going to hand off comments to Vern Cousy firstly.
Thank you, Your Worship. The list that MMBC is proposing, which has not been adopted by or approved by the province yet, included the glass. So it's a relatively recent proposal by MMBC. So it's still going to be subject to some discussion, and so we expect there may be some movement on that topic. But you're quite right; it would reduce the potential contamination. There's also a trend away from glass because of the weight for transportation costs and such. And I've seen some estimates of glass in the waste stream being quite low in the first place. It is a traditionally accepted thing in our Coquitlam Blue Box system, and so we are very much aware that it would be an erosion of service currently, but there are other municipalities that seem to have made that switch.
I fully understand that it's a small percentage of our waste stream and that trucking it is very expensive, but either we're going to truck it from the house in the garbage truck, or else we're going to truck it from the house in some other way, or we're going to make people climb in their car and drive it somewhere, which I don't know that solves the environmental impact of collecting it in any case. And my last comment will be on the multifamily side, where, not just multifamily though, the restaurants and such. How can we tackle those areas that we don't have as much responsibility for because we don't collect from them now?
I'll take a first stab comment and then invite staff. By offering the service, Your Worship, not necessarily on an exclusive basis, but I think if we are to achieve the 70% diversion rates that are mandated in our regional plan, we have to do whatever we can to get multifamily on board. And our view is to structure the RFP with an optional service for multifamily. We believe that our residents who are in multifamilies would like to be on city services. We're not going to pass a bylaw or mandate that they must be, but we will prepare ourselves for that, for entering that particular market segment with the next RFP round. Vern, anything else?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that the same obligations and commitments that the cities are under also applies to the multifamily and to the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. So as Bill Susak mentioned, there's material bans that are implemented by the regional district, which will also apply to those sectors. So they ought to be thinking about their alternatives and reducing their waste stream. And we think that through this RFP, we might be able to offer a reasonable alternative for them to work towards that.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that staff is advising us of its intent to proceed with this, and by doing so has invited the comments and questions that are now coming forward. Councillor Hodge asked a lot of great questions, made a lot of very good points, and the mayor did too, and Councillor Sikora was a good joke anyway. I'm reminded of a quote that says, "All change is not growth and all movement is not forward." And we have to, my comments to begin with, we have to ensure that this is progress, that this does make things better. Generally speaking, as has been said, Coquitlam residents are pretty happy with the service they're getting. The latest Ipso Reid survey backs that up. People are used to it. We know that none of us likes radical change, or maybe some of us do, but I don't. this will be a big change. Councillor Hodge made a good quote about something about changing the habits in the kitchen. Ronald Reagan said, "All great change in America begins at the dinner table." You might say that this great change will begin in that receptacle underneath the kitchen sink a few minutes after people leave the dinner table. So I just have a couple of points here that I want to ensure that it's been a pretty detailed conversation right now, that when we start, that the communication of this, and there should be, I think, some communication with the public right away now, because it's a complicated thing, and I think we should let the public know what we're thinking of now, and they need to know that this is going to be a rational yet simple system. That's they also need to know that it's going to be cost effective, and one of the questions I think people would probably naturally ask is, am I going to have to go out and buy a whole bunch of new garbage receptacles? And can you deal with that particular issue, Mr. Susak, if you can?
Yeah. Thank you, through your worship. No, they will not have to directly buy garbage receptacles. The provision of an automated service would also include the provision of the carts, and that would be all carried in the annual rate in the solid waste levy.
Would that lead to quite a big increase in the solid waste levy then?
To be seen, Your Worship, that is why we are trying to get our handle on the value proposition. We know what it costs now. If it turns out that this is at substantially more cost, clearly we'll be having discussions with Council. Our view on the next step is to bring forward all of that data and let you know where it sits.
Good, because I too would like to have a handle on the value proposition. I've never quite heard it put that way. That's an elegant way of putting it. Now, it seems to me that this system, sort of system like this, will put us quite in line with our neighbors in the Tri-Cities, correct? The Port Coquitlam, Port Moody, very similar, because they have systems like this already. Is that correct?
Yeah, Your Worship, that's correct. They have automated collections.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm thinking of when I hear that answer, and that's what I was assuming as well, is that if we have a similar system, I think we should really try to look at the almost identical systems, especially because there are some odd areas of Coquitlam and probably odd areas of Port Coquitlam and Port Moody that are essentially cut off. And that I know that there's one place at the end of Honeysuckle Drive that there's two cul-de-sacs where right until you get to the end of the cul-de-sacs you're in Coquitlam, but at the far end you're in Port Moody. And so for Port Moody, garbage trucks have to make a big roundabout trip to get into that little cul-de-sac at the end and pick up that garbage because they have special receptacles. One would think that we would want to go ahead and try to coordinate that, so maybe we can, on a contract basis of some sort, pick up Port Moody's garbage there, and maybe there's some places they could pick up ours that are cut off, or vice versa, to make it a little more rational so we don't have trucks lumbering all over the place, having a big footprint. So that's probably really long range, but that's something I'd like you to keep in mind, that would be an efficiency, I would think.
Yeah, Your Worship, I don't think it's long range at all. If it turns out that the city of Coquitlam goes for automated services that are very similar in nature to our neighbors, it's a matter of rationalizing an intermunicipal service, and I think that the relevant operations manager would be getting together and plotting out how best to save money for everybody. It's a good suggestion.
That's good. So good, and I think that's an answer that the people of Coquitlam would love to hear, because it makes things more efficient and cost efficient specifically. So that's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate the answers.
Mr. McDonald, on the communication side, wanted to make a comment.
Just to speak to the communication portion of that was raised, we've already been working with Mr. Susak's staff for well over a year on other initiatives around this. And this is a multimedia, long-term public education process. This is going to take a long time. It's going to require a lot of repetitive information going to the public in different ways, and we're prepared for that. Change of this nature it always seems like it's rather easy. I can advise from other communities it can be quite difficult. So it will require the traditional almost marketing concept of repeating the message 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 times. So it's not going to be a minor piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. So my colleagues have raised the concerns that I have as well. First of all, we do have an improved service, dramatically improved, and I really, when I first was door knocking in 2008, the number of garbage complaints was unbelievable, and certainly when I was door knocking for last year's election, I didn't hear a single word really about waste removal. So I think that certainly is very telling. I do have a question, though, around, when we go to Ipsos Reid and we say that, this is 88% of the respondents are quite happy. One of the things that I worry about is how many of those respondents are multifamily who are not getting city service. And I went back to the Ipsos Reid poll, and it doesn't really parse that out. So I'm much more interested in hearing about the complaints, have the number of complaints dropped, rather than the Ipsos Reid survey, because we only serve 16,000 units, is my understanding. And what percentage of our total multifamily is that? Is that a third?
Your Worship, the city's single family, we serve close to 25,000 single family, all up for organics and recycling and garbage. We do serve by far most of the multifamily on the recycle side. We do not serve multifamily for solid waste or organics, but we serve approximately 80% of the multifamily units for recycling needs. Top of mind, I think Coquitlam has somewhere around 25,000 single-family dwellings, and somewhere around, I think it's close to 20,000, but I might be wrong. I'd have to ask Jim how many multifamily units there are.
I won't put you on the spot, Jim. It's okay. Well, that's helpful to know that we do the recycle. From my perspective, we're not going to reach our targets unless we can bring multifamily on side, and we know we're building more multifamily in the Northeast. We know that that's increasing in Millardville. Like we see it everywhere in our community, and until we can bring them into the fold. And bring them up to speed with the organics being separated out, we're just not going to meet our targets. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's really important, and I think you said that it was an option for the provider to consider bringing multifamily, and I don't think it should be a consideration. I think that's where we need to go, because I think we're just not going to meet our targets as a community. So,
no, just to be clear, Your Worship, we want to provide service for multifamily. At this point, what we're saying is that we're not thinking in terms of regulating that multifamily must exclusively come with the city's service provider, but we intend to offer organic and solid waste services to the multifamily strata units, and that signal will be in our RFP.
And we'll be competing with. Meaning
the city service would have to, stratas will make their own decisions on who they want to be with. Yeah.
Okay, so that feeds me back to planning and making sure that they have the capacity, these new units that come on side, that they have the capacity to have these 3 streams as multifamily units. So it's one of those, they're not going to, I don't imagine if I was on a strata that I'm not going to opt for that, for separating it out, if there's no capacity within the structure to contain it. So it all has to be in sequence. We have to do that on the planning side if we're going to make that an option.
Your Worship, call a little cold on this one, but I do understand the question, and maybe either Bill or some of the staff from Environmental Services can answer with a more current response. But I do recall there, between some of our development planning staff working with engineering staff, have been looking at that. There was also an initiative being promoted by Metro Vancouver around that to try to get some consistency, I believe, across the region. So if council wishes, we can go back and get a little more detailed current information and get that to you. I just don't have it in hand.
That's great. I just think we need to be thinking about that. If this is the direction that council decides we want to go, we need to bring multifamily in line, and yet we're building, thousands of units in this city, but we're not paying attention to that end of it, then we're not going to be any further ahead. So they just need to be in sync. That's all. That's all I'm...
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Metro Vancouver has very recently issued draft technical specifications for, recycling areas, if you will, in multifamily.
Great.
It's sort of fresh, hot off the presses, and that's an item of discussion between environmental services and planning, zoning, building staff. On our work program will be to come forward sometime in 2013 with building regulations, essentially, to cover this off.
That would be fabulous. I'm actually quite pleased to hear that that's going on. I've raised this before, but given that we're moving in this direction, I think we ought to be ready in all ways. So I have two more comments. One is I, too, am concerned about the risk of contamination and going to single stream. I mean, it's one of those things where in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years, we've increased our recycling rates by almost 10%. And that's a lot of hard work by a lot of people. We're well trained now to separate out our recyclables. And then to go back to the single, I have to tell you, it goes against my intuitive training. Well, it's not intuitive, it's been training, but I've now been trained, and it's instinctive. It's almost become instinctive to separate it out. And you're asked the suggestion that we would say, well, now forget that. It would feel wrong, almost the same way that it feels wrong now to put a banana peel in the garbage, because my family's been trained to put it into the compost bin. And so, the risk of contamination, it's like keep moving in the right direction, which I think is what we've been doing. But I understand that we may not be able to choose that may be chosen for us. My last comment is about, and I don't know if staff didn't know this, but on the third Saturday of the month at Place Millardville, there's a group that comes to take recyclables, batteries, styrofoam, and it's just a couple of bucks, and they take all that stuff that you can't put in the waste stream, and they just take it all, and they have their places that they go to properly dispose of these things. So that is another resource in the community, but it's only the third Saturday morning of the month, and that's at Place Millardville. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. A lot of the comments, I guess, that we all have been made, but mine are going to be a little different, not that that surprises anybody. I'm not really what you call a garbage queen, so I don't pay as much attention as I should. I want to talk about the method of collection and the huge trucks with the great big arms that come down, and I mean, they're massive. My daughter lives in Poco, so I sort of have experience when I stay over there with all of those things. And the bins are huge. Now, her lot is one of the smaller kind of lots, but 25 years ago. But as we densify and the lots get thinner and thinner and thinner, and sometimes the front of the dwelling, if that's where they're picking up, if the driveway's in the front and that's where you bring your garbage tins out to, it's going to be wall-to-wall garbage on garbage day. Like, I mean, literally wall-to-wall, because the tins are getting so big and the lots are getting so thin. And I hope that somebody's paying attention to that. I have no solution, but I'm just thinking that that's one of the things that, I want to make sure that whoever our provider is going to be, that they understand that is going to be a problem in the back or the front if we go to this great big truck with this great big arm, and if he's got to go along a laneway where people are trying to back out and they can't get out, and so I'm trying to talk about some of the logic of it. So, as a person who used to be blonde, whose two biggest tools were duct tape and WD-40 in your house. The one other thing I always miss is that sheet of paper that I get every year from the city that tells me when my garbage day is, and also has some other little where you can take styrofoam, where you can take all of this stuff. So I would like to see some garage art come from our from our communications department where we have something that's quite neat and kind of fun and with some humor that you can put in your garage that gives you all those dates. And then maybe if we have to change dates, we can just start the calendar with 2012 if it's all Mondays, and then if it's going to be a different day, you can put stickers out so that we don't have to keep changing the art. But let's make some fun of this and something that the kids will enjoy playing with too, because if they enjoy it, then they teach the rest of us. Like Councillor Robinson, you soon get used to separating everything. But when I sit at Metro and I listen to all the conversation about the single stream, if it's going to cost us less money, less time, and all of that, then we have to re-educate ourselves, because there's no sense doing something just because it makes us feel good. That's how we've been getting such big garbage piles all these years, because it just makes us feel good to throw everything into one thing. I think the timing is, it's now we have to do something, but it's also an odd and unfortunate timing with all the little wrinkles that are sort of coming upon us with the glass and the size of the size of all the stuff that we've got to contribute to, with waste to energy coming on board and what actually is it going to accept. I think there's a lot of stuff going on. Demolition material. Many years ago, you probably all know Linda Williams from, she's been a long-time resident of Coquitlam, and when her and I first moved into Coquitlam and we lived up close to Mundy Park, we were trying to fill up our gardens, and the best place to go was New Westminster, and we had a friend over there who would let us look at the demolition permits, the addresses for all the demolition, and then we'd go out and we'd ask if we could have trees and plants from all the houses that were being demolished, and that seemed to be like a good idea. So I guess I wonder again for communications if a lot of the cupboards and stuff that people are taking out now that I see in my business, something that's 20 years old is almost an antique to some of the new young folks coming along now, but perfectly good cabinets and faucets and things like that that someone with a lesser budget could probably use. So I'm wondering if we could have some fun and maybe some conversation about having some kind of a demolition notification on our website if people want to participate, or how could we, or what might happen, and maybe folks could come and pick up some of the stuff that would sort of stay out of a demolition scrap pile. The more we get the community involved, the more fun I think it will be, and so I'd just like to see us try and reuse stuff. I'd like to talk about, well, styrofoam is horrible. When we go to any of our sites that we can drive up to for cardboard and stuff, it's just full of styrofoam, and I don't know what the heck to do about it, but it sure makes a mess. I'd like to talk about organics and multifamily. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the multifamilies were much different than they are now, and we have a lot of townhouses that are outside. They're not like apartments, so there's many different kinds of multifamily, and I think there's many opportunities for us, and although they may be different with the different kinds of multifamily, I look at mine, and it would be very easy to make our garbage bins into partly organic and maybe partly this and partly that, like I think the bins could be changed, and maybe then we would get more of the townhouse type development coming on stream with the city collection service. And I think just like if I go to Poco now and I see these great big bins sitting there, they'd just be bigger bins, but they would be marked differently for some of the townhouse type projects, and then maybe the city could do the garbage pickup and talk to the strata. I think that's an option that we have to explore. The large pickup item, Mr. Susak, how much was that used last year?
I'm going to have to defer to staff if they happen to know that detail, if anybody has a has a sense of.
Was it a really
how many.
popular?
Do you want to try?
We don't have the stats in front of us right now, but it is a very popular program. Yeah, and we often receive very positive feedback from residents as well.
I haven't heard that, so I would like to know some stats if you got them. I mean, they don't have to be exact, but to give us an idea. And the other thing that I have to talk about that no one's talked about because it probably shouldn't be in the garbage is animal waste. Kitty litter, puppy pads, where do they go? And that's the one question, maybe because everyone knows I love animals, that's the one question when garbage comes up that people say, what are we supposed to do with them? And that is a big issue, and it's a big issue in apartment blocks for folks that have little critters. And so where does it go?
Critter poop. Who's going to answer that one?
Oh, I'm so happy to see you all look confused like that, because I sure am when they ask
Well, the
me.
newspaper on the bottom of the cage would probably be different from. I'm just
It's
trying to occupy
contaminated,
some.
though. Even if you have a birdie, it's contaminated.
I can
There we go.
take a little bit of a shot at it. Metro advises to flush animal waste down the toilet.
Can you speak up, please?
Sorry, it's Metro advises animal waste to be flushed down the toilet.
It's hard for a German Shepherd to sit on a toilet and keep his tail out. But go ahead.
But talking about things like kitty litter, we don't have a good solution for that.
And so here I stay, and I can do the same thing at Metro at our next meeting. But I don't know how many. I bet you there's more households in Metro Vancouver that do have a pet or a critter of some type than there are without. And here we are planning all of this stuff, and what the heck do we do with all the litter? And you go out there and people buy bags and bags of kitty litter. It ends up just being sand, but what do you do with it? And the same as doggy waste. And it's a big problem, and we're going to have to address it somehow. As frivolous as you may think this is, it is a huge problem.
Oh, I don't.
Sure, Your Worship. This is it's interactive to make the RFP as best we can. We'll certainly do a small survey of member munis and just get a sense of what are the various practices around the Lower Mainland, and if it's felt that we ought to be specific to the homeowner and to the waste collector, we'll issue those kind of consolidated instructions. I think we can come back to you with information. We'll do a bit of a survey, find out what best practices are, and also give you some information on those large item pickup stats that you're looking for.
It's not just our city with regards to animal waste. I think it's everywhere, and I'm sure the farms have it all sorted out. So if they have a special thing they do, maybe we have to look into that. But it would be a shame if we're getting into waste to energy and we're trying to be perfect. What the heck are you going to do? But thank you. Thank you for the suggestion for the flushing it down the toilet.
I just Googled the question, and the answer comes back, try to hide it in your garbage because the city won't be able to check. That's the best we can do out on the Internet. So clearly there's a solution here that is...
Same as glass.
Yeah, so there's a problem here that needs a solution, and we're going to have to work on it. I see Mr. McDonald may have a solution. Cat litter, quick.
Not on the cat litter, but on the other part of it.
The German
Habitat for Humanity has a wonderful national program that deals with cupboards and old tubs.
Yes, I know.
And it goes to the restore, and if you set up the agreement properly with the contractor, that's not a problem. And I've also had some experience with industrial and commercial waste, and if that's part of your RFP, then breaking those solids out can actually really save landfill time and moving time, and it's a great process. So there are avenues available on all those fronts.
Yeah, and I know my friend manages one of the Habitat stores, so I'm quite familiar with that. But there's also folks in our neighborhood that might, instead of even going to Habitat and buying something, might be able to go 2 blocks down and get that old sink, you know. So I think it's worth exploring.
Okay. No other... Okay, I suspect we're going to get some information later on that. Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. A good report. I do like within the report about the MBC that you said that you're going to make it severable from the other parts depending on the uncertainty. So I think that's a prudent way to go, and I thank staff for looking at that issue within the report. The other issue comes down to, when we talk about construction waste, is that more of a Metro Vancouver regulated issue than a city issue? Because I know Metro Vancouver has, within their waste plan, set up targets for construction waste increase and recycling within that sector. So is that just between Metro Van and ourselves, the breakdown on construction waste?
Yeah, in terms of sort of the division of labor, Metro comes up with the policy, I guess, and that's why we have a solid waste plan, and municipalities have to come up with the resources. That's kind of the bottom line. There will be some resource implications to manage, the DLC stream during redevelopment, and some of the discussions that we're having internally is how to minimize that burden, how to make the bureaucracy of that tracking as light and as efficient as possible.
Is the other issue the ability of areas for the disposal of construction waste and what's allowed and not allowed through Metro Vancouver? Is that an issue also?
Sorry, Your Worship, I just didn't hear the question.
Is there any issue with when we take to transfer stations our household waste, construction waste? I know is there the proper areas for disposal of all the construction waste within Metro Vancouver's system when we collect it? From concrete to...
Thank you, Your Worship. Metro Vancouver does surveys on what comes through their gate at the transfer station, and actually the contamination rate of household garbage from municipal collections is very low compared to the private sector haulers. But there are a number of DLC waste disposal sites throughout the Lower Mainland and the region. The region is concerned about waste flow control and waste going to sites not under their control or licensing. And as Mr. Suzak mentioned, that Metro Vancouver has come up with a draft model DLC bylaw, and they're looking for help from the municipalities to monitor where the materials go without actually chasing the trucks to see where it goes.
My other question comes on the glass, and we have recycling deposits, deposit system on glass and recyclable, so most people will take their pop bottle, their glass through a recycling system. Is the issue with the glass about the issues that aren't allowed to be taken to a deposit recycling system, unlabeled, let's say, bottles of wine and different things like that? What is the real percentage of glass that's going in the garbage compared to what's going through the recycling system with the deposit system? Is it a very small amount of glass that we're talking about being picked up at the garbage end from the house?
Your Worship, we don't have the stats on that, but we can check with OnCorp and find out what kind of proportion they take of non-refundable glass containers, because they will accept non-refundable. You won't get money for it, but you can drop off mayonnaise jars and whatnot there. So we can check into those stats, but the samples that I've seen relate to the Metro Vancouver waste transfer stations and the volumes, the waste composition.
Okay. The other thing I like about this report is that, we talk about automated recycling and the benefits for going that way, but I do recommend to compliment staff on making sure that this is a broad-range proposal, looking at all ideas, and I'm looking at the gentleman from Smith right here and the other haulers to provide their creativity to us on what they see as the best way to do waste pickup. That's their business. They may have some more creative ideas than what we have come up with here or what staff have. I do also like to think that I know within here you're extending the term, but I would also like the term to be open to what the industry will come back with, whether it might be a 6-year, 8-year, 10-year, whatever. Let them propose what they think works depending on the proposals they're getting to us. The other issue I do have, and I'll tag on to I think what Councillor O'Neill said earlier, I think when we look at the proposals coming back, at the end of the day, our taxpayers, our ratepayers, are interested in what it's going to cost. It may be nice and the best way to go to automated, but how much of a cost increase will that be? And that's why I'm very pleased, unlike Metro Vancouver, when we went one direction and did not have a broad range on waste to energy, that you are taking a broad approach to the RFP. And I'm looking forward to the information that brings back when a report comes to Council. So I want to thank staff on a good report and the direction they've taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. Number one, when somebody mentioned we got a long ways to go, there's no question about it. We're sitting around here as politicians and thinking the way we should be going, the way we shouldn't be going. I think the best thing to do is go with the people that know how and do the work. Do the pickup. They can tell you exactly the type of equipment you should have and what's the cheapest way to do it. And to me, the RFP is going out at the end of February. When is the closing date on it?
Yeah, we haven't discussed a specific closing date, but something this large, we'd want to be out in the market for maybe 45 to 60 days, give them time. There'd be a lot of equipment and issues to sort out.
Yeah.
So we anticipate being back to Council around May, June.
That's a good idea, but I think, just giving them a year to bid on, I think it's way too short. I think you're going to get some kind of proper bid of the technology you're going to use and what you're going to do is a little short for people that are in the business. Anyways, also, Councillor Edmondson mentioned that, I think we should be going, 7 years is too short. 7 years, what you've done, if the RFP goes out and there's a contractor one that has to buy new equipment, and maybe trucks that have the arm to pick up one garbage can, that certainly I don't know what they can adapt their equipment that they have now to do that work, or probably not. Maybe they have to buy new equipment. They have to buy new equipment. It certainly raises the price. So the bids are not good, but maybe you should offer that kind of deal. Okay, 7 years, what can you do? How much money can we save for going for 10 years? How much money can we save for going for 15 years on the same technology? That's probably the way to go, and you probably save quite a bit of money. I don't myself personally appreciate every 2-week garbage pickup. I think, we're way premature on that, Other municipalities have gone to 2 weeks of garbage pickup, have had a lot of problems, a lot of complaints. You're talking about multifamily places. If you go to where I live, I guarantee you we're over 70% recyclable. We're over 70%, guarantee you, because everything is recycled in there. There's nothing that doesn't, outside of the food waste that a lot of people have carburetors, so it goes down the carburetor. But certainly, the recycling is done in our place. There's no two ways about it. I'm sure that a lot of the high-rises would go the same route. If you probably are going the same route, I don't know. But certainly I think the best way to bring the people in that are in the business, they can tell you where you can save money, how you do it, and what kind of equipment you should go into, and many, many other things. So that's what I have to say. But I think that 7 years, last time we went out for 5 years, and it was way too short. And that's why you get those high prices. Thank you.
Do you want to correct that, or no? We'll go with Councillor Reamer.
Thank you very much. Really great report. Lots of options here for us to go out to RFP. I just want to comment on the large item pickup. It's a great service. I've used it every year. Unfortunately, I would like to see my quota increased, please. 4 isn't quite enough, but anyway, I realize that would come with a cost. So the animal waste is also, I believe, a huge problem because we've seen a huge number of increase in pets with the increase in our population. We've seen the increased need for dog parks, etc. So the animal waste, I agree with Councillor Reid, is a huge issue, and I really think we need some clarity on how we can best handle that. A couple of years ago, a resident had come forward. He was a resident in a multifamily dwelling, and he was asking about his recycling. And it turned out in that particular case that they were set up on recycling, but they didn't have the equipment. And so I'm just wondering, are we absolutely sure that for the 80% of multifamily dwellings that are utilizing the recycling, that they're actually doing it and they actually have the equipment? Did we get through that process?
I'll take a brief stab at really a high-level question or a high-level answer, and I'm going to invite the gentleman from Smithright, if he would like to, comment about the nature of equipment that you use for multifamily recycling. I can't comment on the specifics of that one. I just don't have it top of mind. Don't know if any other staff have.
It was Ms. Warner, I think, that I had dealt with on that particular question.
Yes, and I vaguely recalling that situation. The 80% of multifamily dwellings that are participating in our program are paying for the service.
Right.
So, it's our best understanding that they are equipped to use the service if they're paying for it. I recall that particular situation. I'm not sure exactly what happened. It was an administrative issue of some sort where the strata was paying for the service, but they weren't using the service. Mm-hmm. So the resident in that situation was interested in having the service, but the strata wasn't set up, and for whatever reason, from years.
So I guess my question is then, for all these that are set up, are we actually checking to make sure that they are utilizing the service if they're paying for it?
We promote our service, but we don't go out and actively check to see that they're using it, because we don't mandate that the multifamilies use the service. It's optional. So we're not actively checking that they are taking advantage, other than encouraging them to do so if they're interested.
Okay. Does the gentleman from Smithright want to comment on that, or?
Frank, do you have any comments on the nature of the equipment that you use, and just a general comment on? Please come to the microphone. Just comment on the type of equipment that you use, and
just to let you know, we can't, as a council, compel a witness to appear before us, so this is voluntary.
The equipment that's used in multifamily is they're totes. They're larger totes, and we have trucks that go and collect the totes. It allows the multifamilies to separate the various types of recyclables, and that's the majority of it to a certain degree. And I'm sort of speaking from the commercial end of things, which generates, and possibly the larger multifamily, which generates a multitude or a large percent of cardboard. We can also provide bins with the trucks that you may see. We call them front end trucks that go and grab with the forks and lift them up. That can also accommodate recyclables. Cardboard being the biggest one, but there are some other commercial places that we can do plastics for. So we have different types of equipment, but to answer the question in short, totes is the main equipment that's being used to collect the recyclables.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I had actually one other question that I lost it. Oh, okay. The collection fuel vehicle type, the collection vehicle fuel type, rather, we say we're going to allow input from lower GHG emission fuels like compressed natural gas. but I don't know how we'll interpret so we're going to get some bids that say $100 million a year for diesel and $102 million for something. I've, of course, made up fictitious numbers, but how do we evaluate the difference, and what value will we be placing on the lower GHG?
Sure. Your Worship, I think we'll be quite clear in the RFP that we want, whatever your firm's, let's call it base fuel type would be. If the tradition is that firm provides diesel service, well, then what is your price? And then we will ask for, a more, let's call it greenhouse gas friendlier option, and we'll see what that price turns out to be. I'm not sure about how. I don't have it in my mind yet how the value will be calculated, in terms of if there is a dollar value for GHG lesser fuels, but the province is certainly looking at this issue in terms of municipalities having to, let's say, account for all of their corporate greenhouse gas emissions. Some municipalities currently, let's call it, have a bit of a free ride because they have some contracted operations, and the province is now saying, no, let's put everybody on a similar playing field, and even if it's contracted out, we want to know what those GHGs are, but we don't have a specific dollar value set aside for what that might mean.
Very good. And on the large item pickup, I heard several council members say they use it all the time. Our household also is supposed to use it because I'm supposed to have phoned, but I haven't yet. I'm going to say this to my wife. I'm going to phone tomorrow. It's been a long time. I keep getting reminded, but typically at the wrong time. Okay. Yes, please do. Please remind me. No, I know what's going to happen now. Councillor Asmundson moves the recommendation, which is to receive the report, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Whatever. Sorry, Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion is to adjourn. All in Councillor Asmundson, Councillor yes. Robinson, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.